Welcome back. To bring you an inside look at what's happening at the state capitol this week, we have our On Politics panel this morning. Jonathan Saenz is Director of Legislative Affairs for the Liberty Institute. That organization fights for limited government here in Texas. State Representative Garnett Coleman is a Democrat from Houston. He's worked to expand access to health care for Texans and is a member of President Barack Obama's State Legislators for Health Reform. Greg Holloway is with the Austin Tea Party Patriots. That group shares core values of fiscal responsibility, limited government, and free markets. And KXAN political reporter Josh Hinkle is here also on deck with your online chat questions for the panel this morning. The stark reality of the budget deficit is starting to sneak in across the state. Do you believe Republican legislators might have to go back on their promises to hold the line on spending and perhaps dip into the rainy day fund or maybe even increase taxes?
Well, I doubt it. I think it's very unlikely that you'll see that. I thought you saw in the previous segment with Senator Patrick the fact that you've got folks that are holding government officials more accountable. The elected officials know that. It's the right thing to do, and I think you'll see a lot more discussion. It's very early in the debate, even though the session is short. But I think that at the end of the day, you'll see that the conservative lawmakers will be able to make the right decision on this issue.
Representative Coleman?
Well, the Senate has about $5 billion of the rainy day fund built into their budget. So there's at least some consideration of using the rainy day fund on the Senate side. Obviously, the House does not. But we won't be able to fund nursing homes to the appropriate level. That's about a $1.7 billion cut. Plus, we'll see college tuition increase, not a $10,000 college tuition, but just like from 2003 to 2011, it's gone up from about $40 a semester hour to $310 a semester hour, and that's creating a problem for middle-income families.
So we've got about 55,000 patients in Medicaid nursing homes. They could be kicked out?
Well, if there's not enough money, that's exactly right. Or if you don't have a vendor, you don't have a nursing home who can care for that patient with the amount of reimbursement, they're not going to do it.
Get your views on all this.
Well, you know, it's pretty simple for us. We are on record as saying we don't want anyone who has the government as the provider of last resort for them to be kicked out anywhere. I think that's a terrible thing. That's not good for a civil society. Now, that being said, we think that this budget should have no new taxes, no new fees, and should use none of the rainy day fund. And why? Well, first of all, I think that's better government. Second of all, we have some structural elements in our state that if we don't highlight for the people of our state and know we're spending too much on public education and we have a growing dependence on the government as a provider of last resort. If we don't highlight those issues, we'll have a much bigger problem in future biennials.
Do you think this is a good time for the Tea Party? You're getting a sense that this is the time to start doing stuff for Texas in terms of going for bold?
Look, somebody out there needs to take a strong stand and understand we've got some serious issues, and we need to handle them now. They're going to be a much bigger problem in the future biennials if we don't let the people of Texas know about these issues, and whether we use the rainy day fund or not. If we don't prepare a budget that uses none of that fund, we're going to gloss over these issues and we're going to have much bigger problems.
Representative?
Well, I think he's right. He's brought up the budget that has been filed in the House tells us that we need more money for public education because it cuts $9 billion. It tells us that we need more money for higher ed and for Medicaid because it cuts billions out of those areas of the budget. Quite frankly, with a $25 billion shortfall from current services, you can't operate state government and have it do what it's supposed to do for people. Now, you know, everybody believes there should be some cuts, but this would be absolutely draconian. And the reason we're here is because a tax bill was done in 2006 that created the partnership margins tax that, quite frankly, doesn't bring in enough money to offset the cuts in property tax. And this is something that went from $2.5 billion a year last session to $5 billion a year short this session in terms of covering public education spending.
Mr. Saenz.
Well, I think what you're also seeing is a lot more focus on what's happening at the local level. How are these local school districts spending their money? Are they managing it the right way? And a lot of people are trying to put all the blame on the state, but what we're also seeing is a lot more scrutiny at the local level. We're seeing that in Austin Independent School District. We're going to see it in other state agencies. There was a Senate Finance Committee that we were involved in last week. Senator Patrick brought up this issue. What are we cutting at the administrative level? People want to focus on it's going to have an impact on services, but we're seeing a lot of waste and a lot lot of overspending is at the administrative level, and we're seeing a lot more scrutiny on what these local governments are doing with this money that they're getting. And I think rightly so. I think there's been a lot of concern and possible mismanagement there that needs to be looked at.
Let me get your thoughts on where we might go forward. How do you think things are going to eventually end up at the end of the session?
Well, I think our state leaders have made it clear that they don't want to see increased fees. They don't want to see increased taxes. They don't want to see the rainy day fund being used. And so, this is a serious issue. And I think, no one wants a special session. But if that's what happens, I think that's something that our leaders aren't afraid to do. They want to make sure they get it right. They want to send a message that Texas is not afraid to take a leadership on cutting spending, on not raising taxes, on balancing the government and our budget to make sure Washington gets the message that we do things the right way, and they should follow that lead.
Mr. Coleman?
Well, it's really interesting. At home, it's the suburban school districts, the fast growth school districts that are screaming and hollering the most. And that's because they have more and more students every year. These are the, the pristine suburbs. And those parents are angry because that's where they send their kids to school. They send them to public school, and they don't want to see 50 kids or 40 kids in a classroom. Now, as we move forward, I think we're going to have to use the rainy day fund. And if we don't, then we'll leave the state really in poor shape. In terms of raising taxes, that's up to the leadership. Clearly, the governor has said he doesn't want to use the rainy day fund, but Dewhurst has already said he does, because in the filed budget by Ogden, it's in there. We just have to see if the House and the Senate agree.
You think they will?
There's going to have to be some agreement here pretty soon. But, we've got two issues. We've got public education, and the non-teacher workforce has increased fivefold since 1971. That's a problem. That's got to be corrected. We think it can be without hurting education. Then we got the other issue of health and human services. And in 1966, the federal poverty rate was 14.3%. Guess what it was last year? 14.3%. That's unacceptable. We've had a program in which the government has provided those services. It's time to start looking for private and nonprofit solutions to that, because this solution does not work and it hurts our people. We provided something to the House last year. We said, look, we'll cut income taxes 10%, give everybody a 10% tax break, a tax credit, and we'll immediately put that into uninsured people. $100 billion a year. Crickets. Nobody wants to deal with a non-governmental program, but that's the way we want to go if we're going to provide services to our people.
Well, the results of our sonogram poll are coming up here, plus our On Politics panel fields your questions online in the chat this morning. Keep it here for more of Session 11 on KXAN.